Welcome to a fantabulous edition of ARG Presents. I'm Amigo Aaron, joined as always by a man whom, if there was a Mount Rushmore of Goofy, would be somewhere between Pee Wee Herman and Dr. Demento, the Brent.
Hey, is Weird Al on there?
Dr. Demento.
Oh, okay, I want to be. Well, maybe Weird Al can like sit on his shoulder.
Well, maybe not. So, if you joined us last week, we spun the wheel, we made the deal, and this week, Brent, we're going to be playing games that were bred and produced to be played on the PC DOS platform.
Yes.
Now, we made a pact for this episode that we would play PC DOS games from the mid-90s.
Yes.
And so that's what we've done. And somewhere down the line, we'll probably do an episode of PC games from the 80s.
Yes.
But this week, it's PC games from the mid-90s. Brent, tell me, what do you have in terms of memories of playing PC games in that era? It was right before DOS really hit, or as Windows 95 was just coming to fruition. What do you remember about playing games back then?
It's odd because I remember learning the command line interface of Commodore just well enough to load my games. Because I didn't own a Commodore, but I had to load up games at my friend's house. That sort of
load, comma 8, comma 1, all
That's
that
right.
jive. Yeah.
and the splats
Load,
and all
splat,
that
dot,
stuff.
splat. Yeah.
So when it came to DOS loading stuff in DOS was easy. You just look in the directory, you find the game with the exe or the .bat file, and you run it, you're good to go. However, all other aspects of DOS was difficult. Setting up sound cards particularly was a dreadful IRQ nightmare. But, we learned, we survived. And folks of this day and age who only know the Windows 7, the Windows 10, even Windows XP, they'll never know that pain, for better and for worse.
Yeah, I agree with you. When my memories of playing DOS games often revolve around hardware nightmares. Even sometimes getting the game port to work properly was a problem.
Yeah.
And sometimes your machine didn't have a game port. Something that people don't remember much these days is that with the myriad of different PC options from in the 80s and 90s, and this was more of a problem in the 80s than it was the 90s, but you had different configurations of PCs. There was that weird time when we were converting from game ports to USB. Like, I had a bunch of really awesome game pads, and so I was hesitant to go to USB, for example, because I was holding on to these things. I had a really nice Gravis game port card that had 2 game ports in it, So there were, and then you mentioned getting software to load with sound cards and whatnot. Definitely a pain. Another thing I remember, and again, Windows thankfully alleviated a lot of this, was the pain in the butt it was to configure your startup sequence to have enough high memory.
Yes.
To have enough to have all the things you need to be loaded resonant to come up, and I'm sure most people remember having to edit those batch files.
Yep.
Config.sys and change stuff around.
It made you learn. It really did.
It did. You had no choice.
Yeah.
And often people would have different boot sequences for different games.
Yeah, oh, certainly. I know I did for a lot of stuff.
And Brent's game came out, and I believe it was like 96, and mine
95,
came out,
96.
Mine came out in 94. So this was right. These games arrived right at the cusp of Windows 95.
Yeah.
And while Windows 95 alleviated some of these problems, a lot of people don't remember that Windows 95 still was a front end for DOS.
Yeah, because it caused us some problems too,
and
for sure.
And majority of games in that era were not made to run out of Windows.
No.
You would have to just bypass Windows.
DOS,
Yeah. You couldn't run. There was no run stuff in a DOS prompt. You had to exit Windows.
Yes.
And then you'd have to reset up some of your memory stuff to get it to work right. I remember using programs like QM. If you'll recall, that one's one I had to use quite a bit. And there was also video issues. And not just because you had VGA doesn't mean you were good to go. Sometimes you'd have to run special programs to get these special modes and stuff.
Yeah.
It could be real tricky. And I know in my game this week, it had its own setup where you would go in and most games had this actually, where you'd go in and you'd configure the game specifically for your hardware, and you'd set up your video card or your sound card certainly, and your game port right there in the program before you ran it. So it's sort of self enclosed.
Well, it made its own bat file essentially, which was so nice when games had that.
if you played stuff in the 90s, you did have the luxury of not having to worry about some issues. But in the 80s, actually, so in some ways, it was beneficial in a lot of ways. In the old DOS days, you would have those booter disks that would be just like the Amiga, for example. You could just take your disk, stick it in your computer, and it would boot right to the game. And in those days, most of the computers were so basic that it would work because there was no sound and there was no joystick. It was just, something else. A lot of the games of the era we're playing today could not count on you to have a joystick, and so they would often have a pretty robust support for a keyboard, and they had to. And I'll go into that later in mine, but they had to support a multitude of different formats, and then we get into the aspect of networking, and which PC games did have networking a lot of times, and sometimes they worked real well, and sometimes they were a real hassle, weren't they?
Yeah.
I remember the first time we got Doom working, we bought network cards and everything. We never set up a network, and me and my buddy had a couple computers, and when we lived together, we set the game up just so we could play Doom, and it took a while, but we got it working. That was effectively my first introduction into networking,
right?
On that scale. So you're right. You had to learn. And when you got these games working well, by the time you were done setting up several games, you had a decent idea of what the heck you were doing.
Yeah. It taught you a lot. From the 80s, I had all that stuff done for me, or was on a different system or a different platform. By the time the mid 90s rolled around, which is really the exit era for DOS, but I was out on my own. I had my own computer in my own place up at college, and was just like, holy crap. Like I said before, I played around with Commodores and crap like that, the TRS-80. But when you're out on your own, you've got your own PC, there's no one to call. If you want to play a game, you sit there and tinker until it works.
Sure.
So I would be like, what does this do? Okay, that didn't work. What does this do? Okay, that didn't work.
Yeah.
And you might do that for 6 hours.
And we'll get more into this when if we ever touch on PC games of the 80s, but I distinctly remember, without a hard drive.
Oh,
Which and by the 90s, hard drives were much more
prevalent
in the mid 90s and on.
Yeah.
But in the early days, you would just have to tweak the floppy disk to boot up to get everything on there you wanted. And I remember having to compress stuff on the disk just to get it to come up and load. Just a bunch of crazy stuff. And when you look back on these DOS games, it's sometimes not the easiest thing to do. We do have DOSBox as an emulation platform, and some people have gone as far as to actually build an old DOS machine to play these games on in their natural environment, which is whatever. For me, and I look back and I've got several ways to play most of these games, and I look back on them, and I remember being disappointed in a lot of the PC gaming years in the early days. I just didn't think the PC was that good a gaming platform. I know people are going to disagree, but there were some gems that came out on it.
Sure.
And that I liked. But it always amuses me that people want to look back on a lot of the. I'm talking the pre-94, pre-95 stuff. It was a lot of it. It had roots on other machines, especially when you go back into the EGA, CGA era.
Well, you could have a whole show on DOS alone.
Yeah. And so, but there were good games. There were exclusive games.
Yep.
I think we've found a couple interesting ones to chat about today. So, with that in mind, we had the wide swath of games on the PC in the 90s. And we chose a couple. I'm going to lead the charge this week.
Go for it.
And I really had, I've got to say, to start, I really had trouble deciding which game to play because I had my favorites, and I picked over a couple that I really liked on the PC. Just to mention, I just want to give it a couple honorable mentions. There was a game that came out, I believe, in '96 called Screamer, and it was a racing title, and it really blew me away with how beautiful it looked. It was an arcade or it was way past console quality at the time. It was a beautiful racing game that I really enjoyed. That one I almost made the cut. Another one I really enjoyed was Star Control 2. We covered Star Control 1 on the Amigos, and it was voted one of the most hated games of that year.
That's crazy.
People hated that game, but Star Control 2 was a better game.
Yeah, oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly.
And it was more fun, but I like Star Control 1 too, but I really like Star Control 2. I think that's a real fun game as well. And then DOS also had some pretty quality ports back in the day, including the Street Fighters and Mortal Kombats and the like. But I wanted to find something I thought was unique to the PC, which this is, and something I thought was kind of revolutionary and maybe doesn't get the press that it should. And so I chose as my game a fighting game for the PC called One Must Fall 2097.
Yes.
Now, One Must Fall 2097, I'm just going to call it One Must Fall henceforth, was developed by of some fellows called Diversions Entertainment. It was published by Epic Mega Games. Epic Mega Games published a lot of seminal titles in that era. Jazz Jackrabbit was one of theirs, and a bunch of others. They had shooting games, they had platform games, and this was their effort in the realm of fighting games. And you're probably thinking to yourself, "Oh, here we go, a fighting game from Aaron." No, nothing new there. But One Must Fall was what made it remarkable was the time it was released. And I guess to make this make sense, you've got to kind of look at what was going on. So, if you're a kid in the 90s and you have a PC and you're watching what's happening in the arcades and in the console world, and what's happening was everyone's getting all these fighting games. And if you're a fighting game fan, on the PC, you really were left wanting for the most part. The PC, again, this was a burgeoning time when action games in particular were becoming a doable thing on the PC, because really you couldn't do a great action game for a while due to the limitations of the hardware.
Sure.
And fighting games had been something that had not been really attempted that much. So to understand what One Must Fall was, we're going to go back to the original. There was actually an original One Must Fall without the numbers, and it was a demo. And I remember playing this too. It was released in May of '93. All right. And it had two, like, basically karate fighters in it.
Yeah.
And you just fought them.
It was very Virtual Fighter looking, sorta.
Well, no, it was 2D, but it was
a 2D Virtual Fighter.
Rendered 2D, and they had, and these guys were not. This was not what I would call a graceful game or even that interesting of a game.
I mean, was for a demo.
Sure.
Proof of concept.
Sure. I remember playing this and being pretty impressed, but I thought to myself, but I mean, when you looked at it and you're like, I'm seeing all this other stuff. This doesn't really cut it. It really doesn't. But I didn't realize, of course, at the time that they were actually coming up with something, and this was sort of their proof of concept. So what they came up with over there after this original was One Must Fall 2097. So flash forward to 94, and One Must Fall comes out. So what is One Must Fall? So One Must Fall is a fighting game that depicts humans who basically get inside of giant robots and fight. Okay, and so the robots are called HARs, human assisted robots. Okay, so think mech.
Yeah, they're basically fighting mechs, not gun mechs.
Right, these HARs are physically piloted by a human, and what makes this game interesting is that you've got 10 different humans and 11 different mechs. Eventually, there's a secret one, and when you pick a human, they have stats.
Yeah.
They'll have agility, they'll have strength or toughness, and you pick them, and their abilities add to the mechs. They augment the mechs' the abilities in combat.
How fast you get stunned, how much damage you do. Stuff like that.
Sure. What makes it one of the aspects of the game that's interesting is that you could pair these different pilots into different HARs and see how they're going to do. Some of the HARs are more agility based. Some are more like brute strength based,
right.
And so it's interesting. Do I want to put the agility guy in the brute strength mech to give it more agility, for example?
Kind of balance it out, right?
So that seems like a simple concept, but it actually adds a lot of depth to the game. So this thing came with a ton of characters here. Just to go over, I'm not going to go over every person in the game, but I'll name a few. And the interesting about the game is that the plot of the game has you working for the manufacturer of these HARs, right? It's an outfit called the World Aeronautics and Robotics, and it's called WAR. Right?
Yeah,
Makes
WAR.
sense, right? It's the most powerful corporation in the world, and they specialize in making these robots. And so, amongst the many, there are several different ways to play the game. But one of the game's basic one-player mode is you go through and you fight all the other executives there at war, and it basically determine the best, right? And so they all know each other. And I think there's only one. I think Angel doesn't work there, but everyone else works there, and they all know each other, and they all badmouth each other.
Yes.
And that's something else that when you pick, depending on which pilot you pick, when you end a round, there will be some dialogue between you and the opposing pilot. Both. And that's true. At the end, it shows you the news. So, but some of them have their own little plots. Some kind of aren't super hateful to each other, but none of them really get along. I don't think.
Yeah.
And so that adds to it a little bit. And they also have like faces, so you get to see the different pilots. But it's still so. The mechs, of course, the HARs don't talk, just the pilots do. So that's one thing they've got different over, like say, a Mortal Kombat or a Street Fighter. You're actually talking for your robot, but the actual combatant doesn't speak, which of course it's a robot. So let's get into the actual robots. I think these things are really cool, and they give you a really good selection of different HARs. So the first HAR, probably the most basic and easiest to use, is called the Jaguar. It's sort of the Ken Ryu of this game. It's on the main title screen. It's my personal choice, I might add. I'm a big fan of the Jag, and the Jag's super quick. It does this awesome move where it jumps over you, and it extends its arms and grabs your arms and whips you over the top of it and throws you, which is an awesome move. Then you've got it. Now this is another one I like, Shadow.
This is my main.
Shadow's mech, or his HAR, can basically duplicate a shadow of itself that does stuff, or multiple shadows, and occasionally it'll put out a bunch where they just beat the tar out of you, and the main robot just sits around, like I guess laughing.
And the interesting thing about Shadow, which is kind of usually when you project something, the projection's indestructible, but for a Shadow in this game, if you punch the Shadow, your actual mech falls over too.
Yeah, it actually hurts you. Then you've got Thorn. Thorn is like a power character. It's got these big sort of like spikes that come out the top, and it does really nice throws. It's kind of low to the ground. Then you got Pyros. Pyros is this like, it doesn't even have legs. It's got like it looks sort of like the Braxton County Monster. It's got a skirt that has like a thruster under it.
Yeah,
its arms are like two flamethrowers. And it shoots fire everywhere, and it can even spin around real quick and shoot fire. Pretty cool. Then you've got Elektra. Elektra is quick. It's electrical base. It shocks you. You know, it can do like a Blanca style roll.
Yeah.
You remember those? And does a lot of electrical jive. Katana is this mech or HAR that has these two huge blades attached to the end of its arms. It's pretty cool looking too. It's another one. It does a lot of spinning techniques with the katanas.
Huge reach.
Then you've got Shredder. Shredder, its gimmick is it can shoot its little hands out.
Yeah.
And they spin around. They come back to it. It was a mining HAR.
Yeah.
So some of these HARs had actual
other jobs.
All of these things were like stuff they used out in the field, which I kind of like that. It'd be like if we went down to the coal mines and just picked some crap up with the war with it. I kind of like that. Then you got Flail. Flail's pretty interesting because it's a little robot. The HAR is small, and it's got these two like flails basically that come out on chains, and it whips around with those things, and it's kind of hard to fight, isn't it?
It's very low to the ground, yeah.
Then you've got Gargoyle. Yeah. Now Gargoyle is an interesting robot because it can sort of fly. It can control flight and do dives and stuff out of when it jumps, and it's got these big wings. It's pretty cool looking.
I never liked it.
It sort of looks like a robotic, I don't know, like an albatross or a chicken or something. But I always liked that. And then you've got Cronus. Now, Cronus is an interesting robot because it does stuff with time.
And light.
And it can like do these weird teleports and stuff. It can freeze stuff. It can freeze your projectiles. It does a bunch of crazy stuff. And
it shoots prisms out of its chest.
It does. And it's a weird one, too, isn't it? It's another strange one. And I will say one thing. There are no horrors in this that are identical in any way.
No.
I mean, they are way off the charts.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that they're overpowered when you play against each other. I mean, a lot of it also...
The boss one is pretty
there's a boss one that is big and huge. But for the most part, the ones that are standard, I think, are pretty fair. And plus, when you've got the ability to add these pilots... It gives you a way to tinker with
custom abilities.
So I mean, could you build one that was overpowered? You maybe if you pick the right character or whatever. So one of the reasons that when these guys put this game together, they used robots was because at the time there was that controversy going on with violence and stuff. And they didn't want to get caught in it. So, but they still wanted to keep pretty much all the stuff. So they kept, this game was sort of if Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat had a robotic child that somebody screwed with, because amongst the other things you can do in this, there are 2 levels of destructive kill moves.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
I knew of one, but I didn't know there were 2 separate levels of it. And some guys have have more than 1 kills. Now, in this game, there is no finish him or that. You have to time it. Basically, after the match is over. I'm not that good at that, to be honest with you. I've done it a couple of times. And the moves some of them are better than others. Most times what happens is you just shatter the robot. There's one, my favorite one, Shadow has 2 awesome ones. One where Shadow just leans up against the wall, leisurely, and his Shadow group, Mom beat you. And also, Shadow's got another one where he just leans up against the wall and a giant, huge version of him just goes, just smashes your rope, which I thought that was a good one. Gargoyle just lifts you up and drops you, and then I think it's Thorn has a bit where he just throws you up in the air and it just kind of he lands on you. Yeah. But the resulting damage is you explode and it's got parts that rain all over the place. And the funny thing is, unlike any other game, I think, this comes into play in the tournament mode where you are scurrying for money and destructive points. And so it benefits you to kill people in that mode because it's better for you. We should talk about the different modes real quick. So you've got 1 player and you've got 2 player. They're standard fare. 1 player is just like any other fighting game. You go through the game and you fight all the way to the end boss. One thing about this one is if you play the low level of difficulty, when you get to the end, it's like, hey, go back and start over. You're not quite good enough.
Yeah, it's like you have to play on the advanced difficulty levels to get to the actual end boss. What are those deals? This thing, on top of that, it also has, you got your 1 player, 2 player. You've also got tournament mode. Now, tournament mode is a pretty in-depth version of the game where you go through a tournament. And what's neat about the tournament mode is, you can upgrade your robot. You can even buy new robots. You can upgrade your skill stats with earned points and money. And something else you can do is there are people in the tournament that aren't in the game. There are people that show up in their own mechs that you don't see anywhere else. Yep. Which is cool. I thought that was kind of neat. Very awesome.
And so I thought that was fun. Another thing that is interesting about this game is if you go into the gameplay menu, there's a mode that you can earn called Hyper Mode. And Hyper Mode opens up a different set of maneuvers for your characters that weren't available in normal mode. And for most characters will have at least 2 special attacks, and some have 3, I think. And in Hyper Mode, for example, Jaguar does a move where he goes jumps up like a cat and does a lunging attack. Mm-hmm. Well, in Hyper Mode, he can do this in space. I mean, he can be up in the air and do it, which is ludicrous because what would he possibly spring off of if he's in the middle of the air? But you can do it. So Hyper Mode really opens up a lot of wacky possibilities, and what it reminds me of a lot is that Street Fighter hack.
Rainbow Edition.
Yeah, it's exactly what it reminds me of. Yep. And so it makes that a lot of fun. So on top of all this stuff, so you've got your tournament, you've got your single player, and you've got your 2 player. You also have the ability in One Must Fall 29.7 to play over a network.
Yes.
This was a blowaway gimmick back in the day. It supports all the major networking interfaces of the time, which is cool. I'm trying to think if I ever played this. I don't think I ever actually tried this.
No, I don't think I ever played it online. I know I've played 2-player sitting beside each other, but never online.
Sure. The neat thing about that would be to really get together with a bunch of guys and play, and get in a room and just play over and over. It'd be a lot of fun. Of course, that's stuff that gets taken for granted now. But this is like '94 or whatever. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Something else this game could do that a lot of people don't know about is you could record your matches.
Yeah.
In their entirety, and then play them back, which is cool. I always thought that was really a neat aspect that I did do, and a lot of the stuff you can do from the command line, and it was pretty slick. So a fellow named another thing this game has going for it's the music. A fellow named
awesome.
Kenny Chow did the music for it. I guess he came from the demo scene, from what I could read. And he's also released a new version of the title track on YouTube. So if you want to look, I'm sure you can find it pretty easily if you want to look it up. When Epic Mega Games made this, they had a lot of games like I mentioned earlier, and one of the games they had was Jazz Jackrabbit. They had another one called like Tyrannon, I believe was a shooter. Remember that one?
Yeah.
And so if you read the manual for this, there's a lot of the like background baloney in it. They mention like people that wrote and stuff these other games, and apparently over the Epic Mega Games properties, this is sort of a common thing where they'll slip
they
stuff in.
They kind of tie the worlds together, yeah.
Yeah, and apparently One Must Fall guys even are found in other games. Like Tyrion, Jazz Jackrabbit, Jazz Jackrabbit 2. So they actually got in there. Something I thought was interesting that I'd never heard was Epic Mega Games is one of these companies that put out demo discs. I remember getting the demo for this, and I think it had 2 playable characters, maybe it had 3. But one of the things that advertised was that coming soon would be an enhanced CD version of One Must Fall 2097 with extra robots, extra backgrounds, everything. And that never came to fruition. It never happened.
Unfortunate.
Which would have been neat. Now, so far you're probably like, oh, this sounds like a pretty standard fighting game with a few twists. One of the big twists that this had, and it's probably one of the first games to do this, it had interactive backgrounds when you fought. I think there were like 5 backgrounds, and 4 of them, there was some sort of interactivity. You had one level that took place in this like desert, and occasionally planes would come by and just strafe the fight zone. If you get caught in that zone, that does damage to you. So what's a lot of fun is to kick your opponent over there and then watch those planes come in and nail them. They just randomly come up. There's one level where these spikes come out of the background just straight out. Again, you can do the same thing there. There's a level where you're in this sort of almost like, it looks like you're fighting like almost like a furnace or something, and there's this glowing orange ball that floats around, and if you whack it, it'll shoot fire from the ground underneath your opponent.
Yes.
So, which is cool.
It's dodgeable, but very difficult.
And then my personal favorite, there's this giant, it's like a cage match, and there's an electrified cage, and when you whack your opponent, he flies up into the cage and you get shocked. The funny thing is the shock does no damage.
Just kind of.
I used to do that all the time, thinking I was just wasting these guys, but in actuality, I wasn't doing nothing. So interactive backgrounds, awesome.
Yeah.
Now let's talk meat and potatoes here in terms of the graphics, the controls. The controls in this game are tight.
Fair.
They have set up for analog joysticks, but I mean, I think you can use any joystick. I remember playing this on and this was built from the ground up to be a keyboard playable game. So they did a pretty good job with the special moves of making it something that you can do on a keyboard.
Yep.
The overall graphics are sort of a 3D. They're sort of that 3D render. It's a 2D render with 3D model.
Yep.
That thing. I mean, would I call them the best graphics ever? No. Even at the time it was released, I didn't think the graphics were all that great. They were okay. The robots look good.
They were a little dirty.
The backgrounds, they were fuzzy. The backgrounds look, they're okay. They're not the best, but I mean, they certainly work. They do the job. And this is one of those games where it's substance over style in this case. I mean, yeah, it's not the prettiest game, but it plays very well, very smoothly. And for the most part, all you need to play this, I believe, as I recall, was a 386 or above with a minimum of 4 megs of memory and a VGA.
Wow.
So,
That's actually super impressive.
If you think about this,
I thought this would have been a Pentium only game.
Well, a lot of people, like even when Brent told me what he wanted to pick, and I was like, it seems too modern. If you think about the quantum leap computers took from 93 or 4, it's quite amazing. I mean, you're talking about, this would have been the minimum specs would have been a 386, which what that tells me is there were still plenty of 386s out there at the time. It's quite remarkable. And I remember having just a basic machine. Of course, there was no 3D acceleration or any of that
Not
jive.
at this time.
And so you're playing it straight up, and it played great. It was a dream to play. Well, I've talked for a while. What do you think about this? Give us your thoughts.
One Must Fall is one of my all-time favorite fighting games. It really is. I've enjoyed it that much, and it is something that I haven't thought about for a while. Going back and playing this was a complete joy.
Oh,
a complete joy. First off, it's a 2-button fighting game. Those typically suck. But the way that One Must Fall got around it was your buttons are punch and kick. If you're pressing forward on the controller or your keyboard, the attacks are fast and do light damage. If you're holding back on your joystick, they are heavy and more damage. The animations change to fit whatever type of attack you're doing. The reason why this is important and so good with a game like this is the combo system in this game is superb. Superb. It doesn't let you air juggle endlessly, which I'm not a big fan of air juggling, so that doesn't hurt my feelings at all.
I hate air juggling.
It's not Killer Instinct style where you just do the motions and it does the animations for you. It's Street Fighter 2 style where the combos are in there and they count up the combo hits as you go, but they are combos based off of your animation. So you can jump in with a light air attack, do 2 light punch attacks, and then finish with a strong kick. For most characters, that would be a combo. It'd be a 4-hit combo. The game would record it as a 4-hit combo, and you'd get credit for it. But it is based off the character's animations, not based off of a predetermined this is a combo. Which these are the type of games I love. Yeah. I love.
And it credits you point-wise for the amount of consecutive strikes.
Yes.
Which is nice. Something I should have mentioned, and it got me to thinking as you were talking. Something else this game does, and this is a credit to a game where this was very rare. The sound effects in this are second to none. They're really second to none. When you clang on these robots, the noise it makes is satisfying as heck.
Yes.
I mean, when you barely tap it, it's just like somebody took a wooden spoon and whacked the pan.
It's a tink and a thunk.
And then when you actually for example, land a big roundhouse kick or something, the noise it makes, it's like somebody's smacked the Liberty Bell. Yeah. It's an awesome noise, and I bet they really worked on that noise. I mean, it's got the most satisfying sound effects I can ever remember. They're just so tremendously good in an era where sound was
overlooked.
Much like the music, it's the sound was not necessarily a big deal. If the game has failings, like I said, the graphics. When you're fighting in a 1-player mode or 2-player too. After your fight, this guy comes up and reads the news about your fight, and the news gets repetitive pretty quick because the text. And he also is kind of goofy looking, I don't know if it's a he. I guess it is a she.
Here's the problem: the graphics are a mix of anime through your character portraits. Yeah. They're very anime style, and they're all static. And it's the news reporter's anime style, but the robots are futuristic, not anime style. They're dirty. They don't have.
They look like something that would work somewhere.
Yeah, They don't have the anime style robots. They're not these big shiny things, and they're not big and clunky for the fact of being clunky. They look functional.
Yeah.
So it's a mix of two styles. That is probably one of the worst aspects of the game because you look at your portrait a lot. And you've got this anime face that doesn't fit the rest of the game.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they went for an anime style on this, but you're right. And the robot, I don't know if it's a sort of anime. It's funny when the Jaguar wins. all the robots, they strike a wind pose, and he does the traditional Japanese one arm up, the leg back. They're okay. I'm not gonna ballyhoo that. Like, there's a scene whenever you're starting the match of the two robots in like dry dock. The guy's working on them, and then in the bottom is where you see the two people talking. It's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
The in-between stuff's okay.
It's just the portraits are...
Basically, you're just clicking your button to get the hell out of there because you want to go fight more. This game had secrets. Tons of secrets I didn't know anything about. Holding buttons down at certain times. I didn't realize that if you finish... There's one area that if you finish off a robot with your super mega killer move, you'll fall through the floor, and there are two hidden robots, fire and ice, that you can fight, which I've never seen.
Oh, wow. No, I never knew about that.
I read a ton of stuff when I was leading up to this, so I'm anxious to go back and play it. This game never really left my memory because, and really this is the jut of it that I wanted to get over. This game came to a fighting game starved Aaron that was desperate to have something to play on his PC that was going to be not crap. You know what I mean? And this was it. Yeah. This came out and I thought to myself, this is the game. And we played the crap. And I remember going with Chad and playing other fighting games and laughing at him because the gameplay wasn't there.
Yeah.
This game has the gameplay.
It is very tight. The animations are they're not super smooth. The animations are not super smooth. They definitely could use with a few more frames. But I will have to say, the lack of frames do make the robots feel more substantial. They feel more clunky, feel more massive.
Although some of these robots feel downright nimble.
Oh, there are.
And it makes you feel good when you're playing them. So a game like this that was pretty well received, of course, you know what that means. It's sequel time. And it came 9 years later, by the way. It took a while. So you had Battlegrounds. One Must Fall Battlegrounds. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I played this game a few times. I didn't even look at it when I did this because I had already seen it. And this was sort of this is one of those games that was rendered. It was a 2D game that was in fake 3D, and I did not like it. Not a bit. This game fell somewhere for me between Pray for Death and FX Fighter, if you'll recall those two games on the PC.
That might be
Listen, I played all the fighting games on the PC. I thought about doing FX Fighter too, but I just couldn't handle it. I didn't like. It kept a lot of the story and stuff, but to me it just didn't work for me. One thing I did discover, and I'm eternally grateful for going to researching this, is there at one point this game, and I can give you the exact date here. February 10th, 1999, this game was declared freeware by the developer. So you can go play it for free right now.
Go get it. Do it. Yeah.
Now, before you go get it, I found out about a project called the Open One Must Fall, OMF project. And these are guys that are going back and redoing One Must Fall to play better on a modern system. I tried this out for the first time yesterday, and it's not perfect. It's not 100% perfect, but it's pretty good. But what's great about it is it lets you play in modern resolutions. Real high res, and it's nice. Boy, it's real beautiful to go up there. I really liked it. The controls are good, and it plays well, and they're working on it still. In fact, it's been worked on this year, so I know they're still after it. They've been working on it now for like 4 or 5 years. So I fully recommend that.
I can't wait. I'm hearing about this today for the first time. I can't wait to get my hands on it.
So
can't wait.
I found some reviews for this. The GameSpot gave this 88%. My Abandonware gave it 5 out of 5. Free Game Empire gave it a 78%. Not bad. It was a good game. This was released on a PC Gamer demo disc,
right?
But I couldn't find a rating from PC Gamer anywhere. I couldn't see it. I swear to God, I think I remember reading a review for it, but I couldn't find it. I looked this up on eBay. So this game is real strange to look up. I found a bunch of these things in Spain. All right, and
okay, yeah.
They range from $15 to $70. or best offer, and then I found some 3.5-inch floppies in the U.S. But the boxes were odd to me. I didn't recognize them. So this is one of those games that probably get redistributed, repackaged like about 1,000,000 times because it was basically almost shareware. So your mileage may vary on it. I did also have a look to see what Battlegrounds was going for, just if that's your bag, and you can get it for around $20 all day.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed going back and having a look at that. I had to say that's one of my faves. So Brent, all that in mind, you picked one of your faves this week, and I knew you would. Let's talk about what you've got in store for us. What do you got?
Big Red Racing.
All right.
Holy moly, did I love this game back in college days. Big Red Racing is developed by Big Red Software, probably most famous by they picked up the Dizzy series when its developer left, and they made good Dizzy games.
Okay.
Magic Land Dizzy, Dizzy Panic, Spellbound Dizzy.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they had a good pedigree of that sort of software going in.
Are they a British company?
Yeah, English, yeah.
Yeah.
So they went from that, and they got their little group together and said, you know what? We are going to make a racing game, and we're going to pack it full of attitude. This is the 90s attitude. Poochie was on stage. He was ready to go. And they had huge aspirations that this was going to go. This was already slated to go to the N64. This was going to hit the PlayStation, the Sega Saturn, the 3DO, the Atari Jaguar. It was that type of budget, that type of game. It didn't make it to any of them. It got scrapped for every console. DOS is the only release it's ever had.
This looks like something you could see on the Jag.
I think that, I don't know what that exactly means, but okay. Big Red Racing also is sort of famous for having this manual, this, I guess, extra insert into the box, where it would have been, because it also got canceled. They had someone in their company, his sole job for 2 months was to write out the history and the story behind Big Red Racing. And they finally presented this tome of knowledge to the developer, or to the publisher. The publisher was like, that's going to cost like $30 to put in the box. We ain't doing it. So his work got scrapped, and unfortunately, there is no surviving manuscript of everything this guy wrote. Put a text file
in there?
No, it was huge because the game is very expansive. So, what is Big Red Racing? Like I said, it's an attitude-based, in-your-face racing game where you have tons of locations, tons of vehicles, characters to choose from. All the characters have their own little quirks and quips that they say. There's an overall commentator that kind of commentates on the race as you go. And it's all it's borderline rude humor in some places. It's borderline racist humor in some places. It's not racist to be cruel, it's racist as in stereotypical. It takes stereotypes and really pushes them to the extreme. And that's what they were going for the whole racing thing. They wanted that kind of attitude, that kind of in your face. The text on the screens, like when you're choosing one player or two player and all that stuff, is just continuously jumbling between different types of text, that just to have that extra attitude. And that is probably what initially doomed it for the console releases, was it would have to have been so cleaned up for a console market. Like, it would have, in its current day package, it would have never been released for Nintendo. Way too borderline crude. So, it's a racing game, right? Mm-hmm. And every track has 2 cars you can choose from. If you're on a city track, you've got a minivan or a Volkswagen Beetle. If you're on a dirt track, you have a 4-wheeler or an ATV. There are helicopters. So you can, in tracks with helicopters, you get 2 different helicopters. You can go to different planets in the game. You can be on Mars. You can be on Venus. You can go in big rigs where you're on monster trucks or 18-wheelers. Snow courses where you're in snow plows or all-terrain vehicles. You're in rock quarries where you're in dump trucks and excavators. And you've got water courses where you're in motorboats and hovercrafts. So the game has so many options and vehicles. It's so packed with that kind of action. There are 24 courses. 24! And a racing game of this style is unheard of with that many vehicles. And the game is this, it's certainly not arcade, but it's certainly not simulation. It's got this floaty, it reminds me of San Francisco Rush, that kind of floaty feel. Whenever you're jumping over hills or you're banking off turns. Also, you have the track and you have the world, but there are no invisible walls. So you can just literally turn left and just go and explore the world on every course. Now, you can't win that way because there are checkpoints you have to hit, but the game's not restrictive. It's almost open world in a way. So you've got courses in Kenya, in England, Chile, the United States, Australia, Mexico, Egypt, Ireland, China, the Arctic, Germany, Japan, Russia, Italy, Norway, go up to Mars. You're in Spain, Scotland, you're in Venus, India, France, Hawaii, and the moon. Those are diverse locations. And every location has an opening text scroll that's kind of, Italy's talking about pasta and pizza, and Hawaii's talking about volcanoes. So, it's got the stereotypical location scroll at the beginning talking about how the event is. And the game is fast. It's fun. It doesn't take itself seriously. Best of all, it's got a cockpit mode for every vehicle I mentioned before. And they all have unique interiors, unique steering wheels. Now, the graphics aren't cutting edge. They're not, this isn't going to replace Forza. But all of them have unique interiors, unique graphics. Driving in first-person mode will make you sick because you jump so much and you fly so much, but it's just darn fun. What did you think about it?
Well, I remember this game from back in the day.
Yes.
And I
love this game.
Infatuation with this
game.
game.
My gosh.
I appreciate the amount of the variety. I always have. They did a good job of putting their stuff in. This thing has two basic problems with me. One, it's got the worst, ugliest menus of all time.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They go for some kind of like serial killer aesthetic. I don't know what they were smoking.
No, it was edgy. That's what it was edgy.
Well, let me tell you something. I didn't like them then, and I'd forgotten about it when I turned it on. I thought, man, I've really got this thing glitched up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that admittedly the font, I guess.
It moves.
It's horrible. It's downright horrible.
It's like if they called up the world's craziest like chain letter writing serial killer and said, "Listen, we need some menus. Go get you some magazines, cut out some letters, and get busy." And they're like, "Okay."
Yes. Yep.
And then secondly, and I had the same problem when I played this back in the day. I just don't like the game, the racing in the game. When he says it's floaty, this is not a good thing. It never. On the bet, listen. This is that classic example of that uncomfortable era where people try to use software rendering for 3D, and it's just ugly game. And I can get past ugly. I mean, I work with you, but what I can't get past is bad gameplay, and I could not control this car. I never could. I never liked the control. I just don't like the engine that they use, no pun intended, to race. I never liked it. All this variety, it doesn't do. I mean, let's face facts. Let's boil it down here, in my opinion. The spaceships, the boats, it's the same basic bear, homie. It's the same.
No, it's not
it's
even
the same,
close.
It's the same racing game with a new coat of paint. None of the stuff controls very well to me. Now I can do better on some courses than I can others, and I'm not discounting what this game is. It is not a bad game. All right, don't get me wrong. And if you consider when this was released, it was quite an interesting game to release in terms of the vision it took to put it together. All right, but if you look at when this was released, so I mentioned a game earlier, which was Screamer. They came out just a year past this one, and if you compare the two visually, it's unbelievable. If you compare the two from a control standpoint, it's not. There's no comparison at all. I just didn't like the way this thing controlled. It was tough to control for me. Now I went back and I tried to play this online, and I didn't like the way it felt. So I went ahead and pulled it down and loaded the DOS box up, installed it, and played it, and it was better. This is not the kind of game you're going to want to play in Java. You're going to want to get this and play a proper game of it. But it was very similar to the way I remembered it before. It was okay. I mean, it was okay.
No.
But it's part of the problem I have with this, and it's not Big Red Racing's fault. It's just this type of game I was not a big fan of back in the day. Even back then when it was fresh and new, I was just like, eh. I mean, I like a lot of the stuff in this, but for me, I didn't enjoy the actual gameplay of it. And that's just me. I'm not saying not everybody would enjoy it. And like I said, I enjoyed a lot of the, and you're right, the humor and stuff's wacky. I like it. I love the fact that there's boats in it and all this crazy stuff. It makes it fun. And one thing about this game is that it's a fun game. You're right. It's not a simulator. This isn't a game where you're going to go into it and have a real hardcore racing experience. It's just it's a slightly wacky, almost like kart racy sort of game with just a bunch of crazy diversity. I mean, if you look at it from that aspect, it did a good job there.
Okay.
But I mean, I personally did not enjoy the actual racing portion of the game.
Now Big Red Racing, unfortunately, does not emulate well, even through DOSBox. Even through DOSBox, it has a jittery camera. And if you look this game up online on YouTube or anything, you can see that the camera is always jittering. That is not how the game it's supposed to be played.
I did, and I experienced that.
Okay.
I experienced that. That's a fact. You're right. I agree with you on that.
The game, however, has so much variety. The courses are so unique. The vehicles are widely different, and they do control different regardless of what you say. It is plain fun. If you're a serious racer, if you load up your F1 Formula games and you sit there in your simulated steering wheel with your cockpit and your gear shifter, no, that isn't what this is. This is set down 20 minutes, load up Mars, load up the moon, gravity jump through space, hear all the stupid comments and all the borderline racist and sexist comments. Enjoy it for the era that it was made. You'll have a great time. This is a game, oh my gosh, I remember I downloaded this game in 1997. So it was well past when it was released. And this was a CD game. So downloading it took forever.
You pirated it.
Yes, yeah. After I got this game and I played it, I went to the store and attempted to buy it. This was college me, no money, and they didn't have it.
Tell them where you lived in college.
Tell
them what you lived in college.
I lived in a camper, not a trailer.
When he says he had no money, he means he had no money.
Okay? I sought this game out to buy it because I enjoyed it so much. And I already had the game. I had it at home full. 6-player online matches.
That is a selling point.
Split screen locals.
Yep.
It was incredible.
Yeah, and that's where the fun lies.
Holy
is in the
moly.
multiplayer. I agree with you on that.
And yes, you're going to hit bumps where your vehicle flies off in some random direction, and it's going to cause you to lose sometimes.
It's vaguely controllable.
It's controlled chaos. It's just you sit down, you put it in cockpit view for as long as you can stand it, because and when you do that, you can't win.
I never play in cockpit view.
Oh,
ever.
see, no. You put it in cockpit view, and it's not because you're wanting to win. It's because you're wanting to have fun. And you just drive off into the sunset sometimes. And when you're so far behind, you're just like, screw it, I'm going to see what's over here. And you just drive for 2 minutes in one direction and find a hidden statue or a hidden landmark.
They did put stuff out there
Yes.
occasionally, yeah.
Great game. Incredible music. If you ever get a chance, you're on YouTube now, possibly. Load up Big Red Racing promo video. They do a music video, full rock and roll suite, and it's incredible. It's so much fun to listen to. This game had great sound, had great music. The visuals are rough because of the era. It was the beginning of 3D, blah, 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 blah.
It's true, though.
Play this game. You're going to love it. Seek it out. If you have to play it on DOSBox, you understand that you're not going to get the full experience. You'll love it. It's a great game.
This one probably would be one that would be a candidate to play on a proper PC of the era.
Yeah.
If you can dig one.
It's
out.
unfortunate.
I will say I did have more fun playing this then than I did this time, and part of it was because it does not emulate properly.
And this is one of those games where you can go. The DOS prompt allows you to kind of screw with things. You can load any car into any race. And play around with it like that through different command prompts.
So you can put a boat in a car race?
Exactly. You can have load up a couple test tracks through command prompt usage. This is also a sign of the time. This released with a map called City 3 that it never comes up in normal play, but it's in the code. And if you load it, it crashes your computer. So don't load that.
Tight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, normally you never run into it. But, yes, this was, from my youth, something that was so near and dear to me. I had hours and hours of fun playing this game. Reviews, it did okay. 7.5 out of 10 from GameSpot. Next Generation gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I think those are fair. Even though I love the game, endlessly love the game. That's why I've been begging for DOS to hit so much.
It's been killing him.
I know that the game does have flaws, and some people could get offended by it. And you can turn the commentator off. All the little quips and stuff, it's just a check mark, turn it off. You never have to listen to it. But yes, please do yourself a favor. Go look up this game.
eBay on this one?
I did not look this up on eBay.
I bet you can find them. I bet you can find them pretty easy.
You know what? I should. Well, you know what? I should just find the developer and who got absorbed after this game into a bigger company. Mm-hmm. So this was actually the last game that Big Red Software produced.
Well, sounds good, man. So, and much like Big Red Racing, we're going to do a bouncy, ugly jump into spinning that wheel.
Oh.
Hit the music.
Oh, geez. Here we go.
Brent, what do we got this week?
We added, and this was a personal request by me, we added Game & Watch.
Game & Watch, Nintendo Game & Watch.
Yes, to the wheel. So
we've got a very diverse lineup of goods on here tonight. So spin her up. Now the oldest thing on here now we've determined is the Sega Saturn.
Yep.
The Sega Saturn with the Game Gear, I believe, in close second. So here we go. The wheel has been spun, and let's make the deal. And the deal is going to be, what do we got there, Brenny?
I don't know.
What's that say?
That is early 1990s arcade games.
Okay.
Ooh.
We're going back to the arcade, you all. So now, the rules of this are quite simple. we will be playing games from the early 90s. What's the final?
1990 to 1994.
Okay, that seems fair.
That is what it is.
And any game, any arcade game.
Any arcade game, yes.
I think I'm going to pick a Williams. And I'm just kidding. Bam. So, please join us next week. Allow us into your homes, into your ears, seeping into your mind. Well, we will discuss 2 arcade games that were released in the early 90s.
Yes.
So, Brent, until then,
drive that way.